Good night, Red. Okay, well, now that she's headed off to bed, it's story time. I'm sitting in the amber glow here. You'll have to excuse me, I put my little screen for the video over here. Now that she's gone to bed, and I can take a moment. Back in the day, I had several different routines I used to use as, in some cases, as to get over shyness early on. And they really were routines, though, in terms of you'd go to a party and you had this set little thing you go through, whether it's a club, party, what have you. And years ago, I had a friend that assisted me with one of these little plots. But I'll get to that over the second story. Now, when I'm talking about, the kind of pickup artist thing there, it's not one of these standard bullshit routines. And really, for me, unlike most guys, the objective wasn't even necessarily to try and pick them up. Now, mind you, I'm talking years ago. We're talking like 15 years earlier, back when I had about an additional 30 pounds of lean muscle mass and long hair. And I wasn't going bald yet. Usually, anyway. One of my little routines, and a lot of it, this was just fun, and it was acting on a lot of levels, and it was just great. Now, I typically would go out with a black jeans, black shirt, and long black trench coat. And before heading into the clubs, I would take the jacket and through the eyelets. I would actually feed one long stem rose before going. And after arriving, I'd basically case the joint, looking around and looking from one girl to the next, trying to evaluate them and get a feel for each one to some degree. Now, usually everyone goes for, the most attractive or this or that, or they try and single one out from the herd, and there's all these weird tactics that they use. It's not what I looked for, because the way I looked at it is, you may strike out. You may get a phone number. You think things can go all kinds of different ways. But as long as you're making somebody's night, even, if it turns out that they have some boyfriend or they're just not interested or whatever, you can still win, so to speak. You can win the night in terms of you've made somebody's night. They're going to remember it. And sometimes that's really what's more important, or at least to me. I know a lot of people, it's all about, trying to get that score, but I don't give a crap. And I think part of being successful in trying to approach women in situations like that, in part, is just, just trying to give them a good night, give them a memory that's worth having, instead of sitting there and trying to just focus on trying to get down there. Even if that is where the tasty bits are. Well, depends on never mind. But I would go in with my little rose, and I'd look around, and I'd look for an attractive young lady that looked depressed, whose friends were off dancing, and, basically being left alone, that were just sitting there sad and depressed and a little bit despondent. And there's a certain beauty in that to me. There really is. And some people will say, you're singling out the weakest one in the herd, but that wasn't it for me. It was this, here's somebody that needs something to change their mood around. Here's somebody that's had a bad day or a bad week, or hell, it could even be a bad life, you never know. That's just letting all that weight gather on their shoulders. And I'd find that one person that needed the rose more than anyone else. And I'd walk up to them and I'd just simply say, "Excuse me. I couldn't help but notice you. I have a tradition, if you'll indulge me for one moment. And that tradition is to give a rose to the most beautiful woman that I find in the establishment." At which point I would extract the rose in one sweeping fluid motion, bow my head, and offer up the rose. Now, on rare occasions, I'd have somebody say, "Oh, I can't accept that," and I'm saying, "But you must. I'm not asking for your number. I'm not asking for anything. This is simply tradition. Please allow me to honor it." And honestly, I've never had to refuse after stating that. And even then, it's rare that somebody refuses a rose at all. But typically, well, thank you. I accept the rose, and I just bow my head to them slightly, a little nod, and I turn and walk away. This starts more conversations than anything else, because you're not sitting there and not saying, "Here, have a flower, I'm going to sit here and try and monopolize every moment of your time." It's the walking away that seems to get the attention. It's that, wait a minute, you were being honest, this isn't just a pickup line, which maybe it is to some level. But more so to try and brighten their evening. I'd rather a more noble intention, I suppose. Well, now that I've wasted 5 minutes on that, it's time to tell the interesting story. Story about... And as you may guess, it's a fairly interesting story. This was back, oh good grief, about 20 years ago, back when I actually had hair and, muscle mass and wasn't slowly atrophying due to diabetes. A young lady friend of mine, very sweet, pretty, long hair, reasonable build, very tall glass of water with great legs though, and an ass that wouldn't quit. Lovely. I should pause there. Anyway, she and I decided to go out to get something to eat. Her and I were never an actual item. We were just good friends, quite honestly. But, the little storyteller/writer in me, sometimes to figure people out a little bit better, you have to test the reactions. So we did. Let's see if this thing even fits anymore. It's been so long. Well, I'm sure it's large enough to fit, but, it's been ages. It's been in storage for a long time, and I actually spent a while trying to work some of the kinks out of this just for the sake of the story. A little bit of that dramatic kind of thing going on there. But this was just a prop. I know there are those that, practice the, B&D, BSN, DS and all that, but this collar had nothing to do with it. Me and collars certainly wouldn't go well together. My personality type's a little bit too dominant for that. But this brings back memories of that day. And I'm going to put this up before I start reminiscing a little bit too much, because it was fun. Now, there are two versions of the story, and I will make that known right now, because sometimes I tell the story that it was in a fancy restaurant, depending on the audience, just because with some people that'll get a little bit more punch. But for the sake of honesty, the fact that I do know some people that protest when I claim that it's better to tell it that way and insist that going straight from the truth is better, I'm going to go straight for the truth in this video. So my friend and I got together. We went by a store after me joking that this would be fun, and she said, "Oh, I would so be in on that." So we went, stopped by one of those little sex shops, and got one of these nice little leather collars for people and the chain to go along with it. And then we headed out to eat. The place that we went was a family restaurant. It's called Friendly's. And I don't know how they have them laid out today, but back then the booths were all fairly low, so when you were sitting someplace, everyone in the restaurant could see you if they just turned their head to look. And we went there on a particularly busy day. It was Sunday, not too long after church time, if I remember correctly. And a fair amount of the people in there looked like they had just gotten back from church. Now, my lady friend and I, who shall remain nameless, well, the two of us went in there, and the entire time that I went in there, I was to not speak at all. Now, granted, we did have to do some small degree of communicating, but not much, and it was so quiet, nobody ever noticed it, and I could talk without my lips even moving. You could barely tell the lips were moving. Barely tell. But only if you're really paying attention. And I could talk really softly while doing it. I've lost a bit of that skill, too, apparently, from the looks of it, but that's all right. In any case, so we walk into this restaurant. Girl at the front is just staring at the collar, staring at the lead, not even looking towards my friend. And she says, would you like to be seated? As she kind of hesitantly reaches towards the menus. My friend turns to her and says, "You'll speak to me, not my dog." The girl gets wide-eyed and goes, yes, ma'am, and grabs the two menus and brings us to a table. And she pauses, because there's one table toward the exit, and she pauses by that table, thinking about it for a second. Then looks back over towards me and her, smiles, this funny little mischievous smile, ever so faintly, and then leads us to the most visible table in the restaurant. Now I'm immediately amused, because either she's onto us, possible, or she wants to basically make sure that everyone gets to check this out because, oh my gosh, everyone's got to see. Now, we were in the Northeast. I was up in Boston. And this actually, I believe, was in, I don't remember what town it was in, honestly. Anyway, I suppose that doesn't matter too much. I just remember it was near a mall. It was near downtown Boston, but not in Boston proper. So she seats us down at this very visible table. And there's a lot of people watching us. But it hasn't completely sunk in. There's probably 5, 6 people that are just, ooh. But being that it's Boston, they go, ooh, and look away. Oh, I'm not allowed to look at that. Not supposed to look at that. Not supposed to look at that. Because this is kind of the mindset. I thought that was great. So we sit there, and I'm completely silent. And I turn my head as one of the waitresses look by and kind of tilts it, checking out her butt. My friend grabs that leash. Yank! Good tug. And I lower my head and turn back. Let that tug out of the corner of my eye, I could tell that there were a couple other people that were starting to get curious about what was going on at this strange table with this strange couple. So over comes the waiter. Hands us our menus, and, oh, could I get you something to drink? Now, my friend, being my friend, already knew exactly what I was going to order to drink. We'd gone to coffee and whatnot plenty of times. So he turns to her, and she says, yes, I'd like, and orders herself a drink. And turns towards me and says, well, and what'll you be having today? And my friend clears her throat and says, he'll be having a Coke. Actually, now that I think she was getting a Coke, so he'll be having a Coke too. And he kind of looks at her funny and looks back to me and says, is that what you want? And I don't respond. She goes, yes, it is, and you will address me. And he goes, yes, ma'am. And then hightails it back towards the kitchen. You can hear this slight flurry of movement. And I'm glancing over there, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Check it out. But she can hear me very faintly across, because I'm talking quietly. She glances over, and the cook has come out of the kitchen to look. Everyone that works there is trying to kind of come out and take a little peek around the corner. What's going on out there? Because, what is this? So the waiter comes back a few minutes later trying to take our order, and walks up to the table and he says, oh, have you decided what you're ordering? Now, in between the time when he came over and returned, I'd surreptitiously pointed out what I was going to be getting to my friend, and she nods, just ever so slightly. Okay, I got it. So, waiter comes over and he says, and what will you be having tonight? Looking at me. I, of course, don't answer. My friend says, oh, I'll be having, and then this says what she'd be liking, and he kind of disappointed while he's writing it down, and turns to me and he says, what will you be having? She says, my dog will be having, and then she told him what I would be having, very specific of that. And he goes, is that what you want? And I look up as if I'm about to answer, and yank! She pulls on the chain, and I lower my head and remain silent. He goes, oof, and he walks away. At this point, a table right near ours, there's this woman with this young child. And the child's kind of wandering around a little bit, kind of looking towards us, not getting too close, but looking funny. Mother's ushering the child over. Get over here. Mommy, why's the man wearing a leash? Says the little girl. Be quiet and sit down. You don't talk about these things, says the mother, very angrily. The child kept staring, but did not say another word. I was actually kind of impressed by the kid, frankly. So the food comes out, and we're served, and we fairly quietly eat, and I make a point of trying to look around a few extra times, checking out, waitresses as they walk by or whatever, and just to get that extra tug made on the leash. People are looking at us like, what the hell is their story? What's going on? Well, we finish off our meal, and I kind of take out my wallet and put it on the table, and then put it back down, and she bobs her head slightly. And the waiter comes over and says, "Here's your check," and goes to hand it to her, and she goes, "Excuse me, my dog will be paying. Give him the bill." He kind of puts it down in front of me, looking really kind of whooped at this point. And I pick it up, stick my card in there, close it up, hand it back to him immediately. And he brings it back over, and I put a decent tip down there, because this poor guy. And then I pause, and I'm like, looked at my friend, and I'm like, "Do you have a 1 by chance?" Just really quietly. Under my breath, I'm like, "Do you have a $1 bill?" She goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Got a pen?" She's like, "Yeah, why?" I'm like, "Give it to me." So I take the 1, and I take the pen. I just start writing on the bill. Big block letters. Finish. Kind of put it under. I put it just sticking out slightly underneath the little billfold thing that they have. At which point I'm like, "We gotta go now." She's like, "Okay." So she goes, "Okay, let's go," and stands up, and she's wearing all black and these tall boots, and, you know, the whole 9 yards. And on the lead, and drags me out there, and we get to the front, and the young girl at the front goes, "I hope you enjoyed your day." At this point, you know, everyone's watching, staring at us as we're leaving. And I turn and go and start to speak, and yank on the lead, and we head out. Walk over to the car, and she's having a fun time. She's kind of snickering and laughing a little bit. She goes, "What did you write on that $1 bill?" And I looked at her, and I smiled, and I said, "I wrote, 'Help me.'" At which point she just died laughing. Actually fell over the top of the car, just couldn't even stand. But this is the kind of weird thing that I did, just to kind of gauge reactions. Because it's really, sorry, it's really a sociological experiment on a lot of levels. Just, let's see how people will react to this. But it's interesting, because this girl was a really good friend of mine. And we'd never dated, we never went out, none of that. We're just friends. But we were good friends, in that I liked to occasionally stir things up and start trouble, so to speak. Just invite trouble. And, well, she was always happy to join me in trouble, we'll just say. Well, one of the little routines that we would pull, going back to the original topic, also involved the happy little caller. The kind of parties we went to were a little bit different than some, and the people were a little bit more creative, we'll just say. And no, it isn't that. Get that out of your head. I had issues when I was younger talking with women. It would make me uncomfortable, and part of this, it's not worth getting into, but there were plenty of enough reasons for that. I should just say that. Well, I was usually her chaperone going to parties. Now, part of this is she didn't like to go to parties alone. She also loved to be the center of attention, as you've probably guessed from the prior story. So once again, out came the collar and leash, helping her relatively shy friend when it comes to first introducing them to people and that whole fear of rejection thing. So she'd leave me in there on a collar. Of course, she'd immediately get her thing by becoming the center of attention, and all the guys would be curious. But she's got this guy with her, so they'd be at a little bit of a distance. And we'd walk around, and she'd check out the guys, and I'd check out the girls. And we would both find somebody that we were interested in. And she would make a point of waiting until the person that I was interested in, and the guy that she wanted to go after, were in the same general area. Now, I should state, whenever we did this, we always went to the party in separate cars. We would just meet there. Or technically a block or two away, and then drive the rest of the way to one person following the other. What she would do is, after we had our targets and everything was lined up, she would walk right by the girl that I was interested in and say, "Excuse me, would you hold my dog for a moment?" And hold out the leash. Now, they would be so confused and startled by this that they would almost instinctively reach out and, yeah, never once did I see somebody, did I happen to pick somebody that didn't grab at the lead immediately. At which point, at the second that they grabbed that, she says, because her hand's free now, she go, "He's cute." he's mine, and then walk after somebody else. Now, the initial response is, oh my gosh, I don't believe she just ditched you like that. Shrug, it's how it works. And then, lo and behold, the conversation started. Now, there'd be times that, the girl, for one reason or another, wasn't interested. She'd pass the lead to someone else because she felt responsible for it. So at one party, I got passed around to like 4 or 5 different girls, had some really nice conversations and a little bit of companionship. I wasn't really out to get laid. That whole massive drive came later. But to me, I'm picky. I have intellectual requirements as well as physical requirements when it comes to that. So it was just as well in most cases, but it was fun. It was great. It was a really good gag, and really, it wasn't so much of a pickup thing as a party gag. And that was fun, too. These are a couple strange stories, I guess. But they're on my agenda and in my itinerary. And, boy, this has gone a little bit long, so I guess I will cut this off here. As a footnote, because I should probably throw this in, I will be starting to tell some of my actual sci-fi stories over the course of the next week. I'm also going to be stopping in with a friend of mine who is a bona fide storyteller in his own right as well, and see if I can get him to tell what I consider to be his greatest stories